Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the lottery for the affordable homeownership units at Battlemarch Village in Woburn. My name is David Cashman. I work with SEB Housing. If you're watching this, I assume by now you're familiar with who we are. So congrats on getting this far and getting yourself into the lottery. That's obviously a great first step in this process. I'm going to just give you a little bit of information about the number of households who applied for the lottery, how many households indicated that they were local preference and how many did not, how the waiting lists will be assembled and how many waiting lists there will be, the breakdown of household types, and then just a little bit of info about how I'll do the lottery drawing and what the next steps are. Before I go any further, are there any households watching who do not know their lottery application number? That's the A.001 or A.002 or whatever it may be that we sent, that we gave to you when we sent you the letter indicating you were eligible for the lottery. If you do know it, great. You don't need to tell me, and it's better that I don't know. But if there's anyone who forgot it or just wants to double check, let me know and I can look it up for you. And you can just type, obviously, since you can't speak back, but just type your questions in the box. I'll just write it here so you can see. Okay, John Warren. So, John, did you apply for this opportunity? Did you submit an application? And if so, was it under the last name Warren? Because I don't see anything in our database. I don't see anything in the ineligible. Warren. John, I don't have any record of you. Did you submit an application for this opportunity? You had to submit an application to get into the lottery. Okay, well, I'll wait and I'm going to move on, John, and then if you respond, I'll come back to you. But okay, so for all the other households, there were 16 households who submitted completed applications for the lottery. Remember, every household is going to get drawn in the lottery drawings, and every household is going to have a waiting list position. Okay, John, so yeah, so unfortunately, you know, the lottery application deadline has already passed. So I can't, you know, it's too late now. So unfortunately, there's not a whole lot I can do for you. It's, you know, there's 16 households in the lottery for 2 units. And so it's probably also unlikely that those 2 units aren't going to be taken by lottery households. If you want to circle back with SEB Housing and, you know, a couple weeks and check in, you are free to do that, but I can't enter you into the lottery tonight. It's too late. Sorry. Okay, so for other households, so for the 16 households who did submit lottery applications, so yeah, you'll all be selected. You'll all have waiting list positions. And the waiting list, there'll be 2 separate waiting lists. If you recall from the informational materials, there is a local preference for one of the 2-bedroom units, okay? Only for one of them. So there is going to be a local priority, so there is going to be a local priority for one of the units. There were 5 households who indicated local preference. The other 11 households did not indicate local preference. In total, out of the 16 applicants who applied, 11 were type 2 households, meaning households who indicated a need for a 2-bedroom unit and who would get priority for a 2-bedroom unit. And 5 households who were type 1 households, meaning they would not get priority for a 2-bedroom unit. So there will be 2 drawings. There will be a local preference drawing and an open drawing. For the local preference drawing, the 5 households who indicated local preference, I'll put their application numbers in the lottery box, shake it up, and draw them out. Okay, it's only 5 households. It is not going to take that long. This is the lottery box. As you can see, very state-of-the-art, but it works. And then everyone's application numbers are on note cards, okay? I will put the note cards for the local preference households in the lottery box. I'll shake it up, and then I will randomly pull them out, and I'll hold them up to the screen and call them as I go. Once I have gone through the 5 households who were local preference, then I will add those households to the other 11 households. And so all 16 households will be in the general drawing. Okay, so then I'll go through that same process where I'll put all 16 application numbers in the lottery box, draw them out, and show them up on the screen after I've done that. So just remember, for the 2-bedroom unit that has a local preference, that type 2 households who are local preference will be the top households, followed by type 2 households who are not local preference, followed by type 1 households who are local preference, and then lastly, type 1 households who are not local preference. On the other 2-bedroom list, the general 2-bedroom list, it'll just be type 2 households, doesn't matter if you're local preference or not, followed by type 1 households. In the information packet, if you're just sort of curious, you don't need to know this, you don't need to memorize it, but if you're just sort of curious how these waiting lists get formed, you can look in the information packet that you would have probably looked at by now when you submitted a lottery application. We show on one of the pages exactly how the waiting lists are created. So if after the drawing and if after I send the waiting list, you're just sort of curious, take a look at that. Take a look at the information pack. We have a whole page on the waiting lists and how they ultimately get sorted. Now that brings me to my next point, which is that as I do the lottery drawing this evening, as you're watching, you don't know exactly what it means. Now, hopefully that doesn't come as a surprise because, hopefully that was clear from the information packet and from the info session. If you attended that, it's okay. If it's not, let me just say it again here so you know. The actual order that I draw the numbers out is not necessarily going to be the order as constituted on the waiting list that I will send to you tonight. And the reason for that is because we have to sort the drawing according to priorities. As I just said a moment ago, type 1 households will not have priority for 2-bedroom units because the program says that type 2 households need to be given priority. So if a type 1 household is drawn, first in the lottery, they're not going to be number 1 on the waiting list. Okay, they just can't be because the program says that. So the point of that is, as I'm doing the drawing, it's unfortunately in some ways a little bit anticlimactic because you don't know exactly what it means. Because you don't know, if you're drawn 5th in the lottery drawing, you might say, okay, I'm number 5, but you can't say that yet because you don't know if the 4 households drawn ahead of you were type 1 or type 2, if they had local preference or not. So you'll have to wait a little bit till I send you the waiting list. The waiting list will be ordered top to bottom in the order of priority that households will get to move forward. The good news is it looks like every household who applied for this lottery has an email address. So I will send you the waiting list within a matter of just a few hours. So check your email, within the next 2 or 3 hours, and you should have something from SEB Housing with the waiting list now. Now, once you get the waiting list, then you can say, okay, here's exactly where I am on the waiting list. I'm number 3, I'm number 7, I'm number 12, whatever it is. Okay, you just need to know your lottery application number to find your application number on the waiting list. Okay, now the waiting list, you'll see there'll be 2 of them, right? There'll be the local preference waiting list and the general list. Everyone, all 16, are actually going to be on both lists. I know that seems a little bit weird, but that's how the program mandates that we do it. So don't be confused or think that there's some mistake or there's all this duplication. There is duplication, but it's purposeful, okay? Now, obviously, if someone is, the number one household on the local preference list and they reserve a unit, then their spot on the general list becomes moot. They get stricken because they already got a unit. Okay, so it is conceivable a household could have a very high position on both waiting lists, but it's also conceivable that they could be in different, more likely they'll be in different positions. You could have a high position on the local list and not as high on the general list. So you'll just have to check and see where you land on both. Okay, the local list will be the first list used to reserve the first unit. Then once that unit's reserved, that list will be no longer used. We'll move to the general list to reserve the other unit. Okay, final bit. I'm sure people are getting antsy for me to get started, so I'll try not to hold you up much longer here. But when I send you the waiting list, you'll notice that a number of the application numbers, are highlighted in green. Those are the households that we're going to invite to move forward in the next step of the process, which is to submit all the income and asset documentation that you did not have to submit when you completed a lottery application. Okay, hopefully you've started to build a file of all the required documents now, so that if you are invited to move forward, you have that stuff ready. Okay, because remember, there is a time limit to submit all of that documentation. It's about a week. So there's a lot of documentation, so hopefully you have it ready. You will notice there will be more households highlighted in green than there are units. That is also purposeful. The reason for that is because, again, we haven't even checked or verified income and asset documentation yet. Unfortunately, it does happen. It happens with some regularity that a household may say, hey, I make, $55,000 a year on their lottery application, and based on that we say, okay, you're eligible based on what you've said there. And then when we actually look at all their documentation, they make 75,000 or 85, and maybe they're not eligible, or there's some other reason that they may not be eligible. Okay, obviously we don't want that to be the case, but that does happen. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is that's why we invite more households than there are units available, because it is conceivable that a household or two households or even three households may not be eligible. And if we just go one by one, it drags on. It can potentially drag on for a long time to find an eligible household. So after tonight, the households who are in green will be contacted with instructions about submitting the income and asset documentation to move forward. There's going to be a time limit on that. Hopefully you have the documents ready. You'll submit them. We'll review them. If there's stuff missing, we'll let you know. And then ultimately, we'll give you a final determination one way or the other, whether you're eligible or not. Households who are eligible then have to be sent to the monitoring agent for a final stamp of approval. In the vast majority of cases, the state will look at our approval and say, yep, we agree, and it'll be done. Occasionally, they'll ask for additional documentation, and if they do, we'll let you know, hey, they've looked at your file and they just want to see a little bit more, documentation about this one thing to verify. But we'll let you know. And then once that happens, we'll have a group of households who are fully eligible, who've submitted all the income and asset documentation, who SEB has said appears eligible, and who the state has confirmed is eligible. The top household will then be put on in touch with the sales team to begin the affordable home buying process. Okay. And at that point, you will be introduced to people from the sales team, and there'll be additional players involved because we, SEB, are the affordable housing lottery agent, but we're not the owners. We're not the developers, the sales team. We don't do showings of the units. We don't take deposits. We don't write up the purchase and sale agreement or any of that stuff. We'll coordinate the closing. We'll stay involved, but we aren't sort of the main point of contact. So please just keep that in mind, that we're not the ones setting dates. Things can change. We will put you in touch with the sales team. They'll have your contact. You'll have their contact. But, if you're kind of coordinating with them on steps in the home buying process, you're going to want to direct your inquiries to them, because they're the ones on the ground who know, when the units are going to be ready and who have kind of control over the schedule. If you need an extension, right? Okay, so if you sign a purchase and sale and you need to get a mortgage commitment by X date and you can't get it by X date, don't come to SEB saying, SEB, I can't get the mortgage commitment by February 5th as I have to. What do I do? Or can you give me an extension, rather? Because we're going to say, we're not even a party to this agreement. We can't possibly give you an extension. You need to go to the developer. Okay? Finally, the last point, and then we'll do the drawing. You have to be eligible up through the closing. Okay? So continue to keep an updated file, okay, of your documents, because about a month before your closing, you're going to have to do a second review of eligibility to make sure that you haven't receive some windfall or a huge raise at work or bonus or something that's put you over the income limit or the asset limit and has thus made you ineligible for this program in the interim. Okay, so you have to be eligible at the time that you submit a lottery application. You have to be eligible when you submit all the verifying documents to us after the lottery, and you still have to be eligible up through your closing. So that's kind of SEB's involvement after the lottery, is we'll be kind of keeping ourselves apprised of important dates, but that's mostly because we need to know when to tell you that you have to do a final update of your file to show the state that you remain eligible up through the closing. So keep an updated file so that that second review will be easy or easier. Okay, and it'll already be easier because you've already submitted a lot of documentation, and most of that we can use, but there will need to be some updates like pay stubs, right? Because by the time you get closer to closing, you'll have more of those, so we'll need updated ones. Okay, any questions or ready for me to do the drawing? Or if I don't see any questions, I'll just do the drawing. Everyone's got their lottery application number. Heard enough from me. Excellent. Okay, so like I said, there were 5 households who indicated local preference, so I'm going to do the local preference drawing first with those 5 households. And here we go. Okay, we're just shaking these up. I've also mixed them up before I put them in there. And the first local preference household drawn is A.011. Oh, sorry. A.011. Okay, sorry. It's a little clunky, but I have to call them out, hold them up, and type them in at the same time, so I'm doing my best to just kind of do all of them. A.011 was first. Next is A.013. Okay, third one is A010. Next household, A.006. And final local preference household is A.008. A.008. All right, that was it for the local preference. General drawing is also going to go pretty quickly. It's only 16. And here we go. So let me just, so again, this does include the local preference and the general, the non-local preference households. Just a reminder that for one of the lists, local preference households will get a priority as to households of similar type who are not local preference, and for the other waiting lists, they will not. It will just be household type that controls. Okay, so here are all the 16 numbers. Shake it up. Okay, first one drawn is A.005. Next number A.006. Number is A.003. Next up, A.001. Fifth house number to be drawn is A.014. Next number, A.010. A.007. A.004. A.008. This is going to be the 10th number drawn right here. A.015. A.015, that was number 10. A.016. A.002. This is going to be the 13th number drawn. A.012. Followed by A.013. Okay, 2 numbers left to pick. A.011. And the 16th number picked is A.009. A.009. All right, and that concludes the lottery drawing. As I said before, and I'll just say again, those are not the waiting lists. Okay, those are not the waiting lists. I will make the waiting list momentarily, and I will send them to all of you by way of email tonight. And so just check your inbox in the next few hours. The waiting list will have all the lottery application numbers ordered, top to bottom, in order that you're going to be invited to move forward. If you're invited, remember, households in green are going to be invited forward right away to submit all the income and asset documentation to demonstrate eligibility. What I think I neglected to mention earlier is if you're not in green, that just means you're not being invited forward now, and you may not be invited forward. Okay, if the household ahead of you reserved the available units, then unfortunately, we're obviously not going to invite you in that situation. But like I said, nobody has submitted any documentation yet. It happens that households say they're eligible on their lottery applications and they're not. So if you're not in green, it is still conceivable that your number could come up. If all of the households ahead of you, end up not working out for one reason or another, sometimes households change their own mind. Circumstances change. Okay, they decide to walk away from this opportunity. These things do happen. So if you don't have one of the top positions, that doesn't necessarily mean that you may not still get an invite forward at some point. You're just not going to be contacted right away. Okay, that's it. Are there any questions? I'm happy to stick around if people have questions. If not, I'll wish you all a good night and I will send you the waiting list in the next few hours here. So I'll just hang out tight for a second and see if anyone has any questions. The household who joined the call, did you have any questions? I know you came in sort of somewhere in the middle.
No.
Nope, okay.
Hello.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep, I know that you joined at some point during the drawing, I think, or a little before. Did you have any questions about, where your number was drawn or anything like that?
Yeah, when you said about the green, I don't know what the green means.
So I'm gonna create the waiting list tonight.
Okay.
I'm gonna email everyone the waiting list that'll have your lottery application numbers. There'll be 2 waiting lists with all 16 households. You'll be on both lists. If you're in green, that means that we're going to be sending you instructions about moving forward right away to submit all the income and asset documentation that wasn't required previously, but which is required now. If you're not in green, it means we're not inviting you right now. It's possible we'll invite you in the future, but we have to screen the households ahead of you first.
So how many units are available for?
There are 2 units total and 16 applicants.
Okay.
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 All right. Any other questions from anyone? Sure thing. Thanks for tuning in. Doesn't look like there. Yeah, you got it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, I don't see any questions, so thanks everyone for tuning in, and have a great night, and we will be in touch. Thanks.